Is it possible? Is it possible to create a story illustration from a spontaneous painting? I don't know. We'll find out. I'm willing to try. I just have this craving to do something kind of storybookish, maybe a little fantasy, but I also want to do a spontaneous painting. So let's see what happens. Hello Minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, today we're going to do a spontaneous painting. It's been a while. We're going to do it again. I'm actually getting ready for a show. Now, I say getting ready, that show's not for almost a year, but I got to start building up some pieces. First, I just wanted to start out showing you the color scheme. I'm going to be using a triad of phthalo turquoise from My Merry Blue. This is from my Merry Blue set. This is the phthalo turquoise. It's going to be a lot of this color. Yellow ochre. Of course, you know, it's a golden color, but it combines nicely, I guess is what I'm trying to say, with the turquoise to produce a richer green. By itself, it's its usual golden color. Just trying to isolate that here if I can. All right, my third color in the triad is the dragon's blood. This neutralizes the turquoise, and it's also going to give me a black, or near black, if I need a really deep color. It'll give me some browns, some grays, and in the deepest values, it'll be black. And it's just this usual rusty self, which is nice. Now that will combine nicely with the yellow ochre for some browns and earthy oranges. Playing with triads is just a really fun thing to do, and it's something I'd recommend, you know, before doing a painting, to see what triads you can come up with, and especially with a particular painting in mind. You can think through that painting and colors that are complementary or nicely analogous, if you will, and we'll just perform a number of different things. I have a feeling this area of neutral I'll be using a lot, and some of these greens and sort of turquoise and teal colors. So that's what we're going to do. This was sort of my inspiration. I don't know who this illustrator is. It's supposedly a Tolkien-inspired piece. I'm inspired by this, the fantasy look of it. I will be coming up with my own composition, and probably my trees won't look anything like that, but I like the sort of cascading effect. Maybe there'll be a waterfall in there. I'm not sure yet. It just depends on what the spontaneity of the washes leaves me. I'm going to try to sort of manage a composition. You can kind of see some of the same color tones in here. Mine will probably be a little more intense. Regardless, this sort of inspired me. In this case, I'm just going to pre-wet the paper, and this is 300-pound Arches paper from a block, because I'm going to be using a lot of water and I didn't want to stretch. 300-pound paper can be thirsty, so it takes a few coats. If you haven't seen my Strathmore workshop, you can see that. I'll put links to it. It's actually now on my channel here. I'll have links down in the description. Basically, I go over the whole process with two of my main start processes. Almost all my starts fall into two categories. I mean, starts can take, you know, any number of forms, but they usually either start wet or dry. I'm going to let that sit a minute, and then I'll probably give it yet another coat. 300-pound paper stays wet longer open time, giving you more time to work. And keep in mind, when you add color to a wet piece, you're going to be adding water to the water that's already there. So you want to make sure there is a lot of pigment in your brush. I like to use oval washes because they give me a point, or they give me a big wide flat area. But I want to make sure there is plenty of pigment in that wash. I'm going to add a little bit of the red iron oxide. It's not red iron oxide, it's dragon's blood. I'm going to add a little bit of dragon's blood so it's not quite so vibrant. And now comes the spontaneous part. At this point, I'm not thinking of scene as much as pure design. For me, design is very important. This is with some dragon's blood added. Design is simply the shapes and the composition that the paint makes. You want to vary, at least I want to vary, the contrast that I get in these beginning washes. And as they spread and soak into the paper, they'll get lighter. Okay, that's been mostly phthalo turquoise and dragon's blood. I'm going to get a little bit of yellow ochre. Maybe to kind of get a foggy sort of background wash going here. And I have to be careful because the washes are soaking in, and this is much wetter than that and adding to the water. So backwashes are a definite possibility. Sometimes they're fortuitous. You can use them. They make for interesting edges. You can see a little bit of one developing there. That right there is a nice happy accident. That may be a waterfall. So I'm going to leave that alone and see where it goes. I think what I'm going to do though is start adding a little water to create some intentional back runs to give me those contrast points. So let's add some in here. Always the temptation is with these spontaneous paintings, it is with me, is to do too much. The ones that I've been least happy with are the ones where these beginning washes, I just basically did too much. And the drying areas too, you want to be careful to mostly just pick up pigment and not water if you're not wanting backwash. All right, I think I'm going to start trying to pull yet more of these white or light areas in. Do some wet lifting. Sometimes I'm just looking for a hint of contrast that I can enhance in the next step. Again, I'm just looking at shape design right now. Yes, I'm thinking sort of landscape-ish type shapes, but I'm not thinking real specific yet. I know that frustrates people because I get that question a lot, how I see what I see, and it's really just not so much seeing what I see. It's a response. It's a response to what's happening. I'll try to pull in some light areas here with some wet lifting. There's some definite backwash going on there, and I'm fine with that. I think that's something I can use. A lot of times if you don't want the harsh edge that a backwash will give you, you can find a dry brush. Here's a completely dry brush. Sometimes, if it's not too set in, you can blend that out. Don't add any water to your brush. Use a completely different dry brush. And it's almost like pencil or pastel. You're just softly blending those edges. I like the edges that were created here. I think that's unique. I've got some fairly hard ones up here. I think those are probably set in now. See what I can dry brush out. That's not bad. Again, this brush is dry. Okay, that's better. That's a little more subtle. I'm going to wet it now. The smaller oval wash, and try enhancing some edges that I see forming. So a little bit of wet lifting here. And another way to create edges is to blot with paper towel. You get some harder, sort of crisper lifting. This is the advantage too of 300-pound paper because it does stay wet longer. I may be able to dry this brush enough by squeezing it for blending. Yeah, that's not bad. If this were 140-pound paper, it would be a lot drier right now. Changing the moisture in your brush will a lot of times facilitate a lot of things. You saw me add water here, and I can go back and pick it up just by a tight, hard squeeze into a rag. Still damp, but it's dry enough that it's not leaving any water, and any moisture on there can be moved and blended. I have a definite backwash stain going on there, which I think will work just fine. I'm looking at this to see what edges I want to blend and what edges I want to keep sharp. All of this can be defined, of course, in the next step. So just giving myself a start. That is the point. At this point, too, I cannot add any more really wet washes. It's damp, but adding a lot of water would be disastrous. At this point, all I can do is noodle it a little bit, and I'm probably to a point where I should just let it dry. All right, I think I have a really good and exciting start here. I'm going to let this completely bone dry, and then I'm going to spend a lot of time looking. I mean, look at this. That is like an automatic tree. That is fantastic. And look at this over here. That's pretty amazing. All right, let's let this completely dry, and then we'll go back with details and see how we can pull this whole scene together. Well, as I get going on this, the task before me now is really just sharpening up details, adding details, creating edges, and seeing what happens. It bears repeating because I get the question so often. As I've already said in this video, I do not see this entire scene. You think I see the whole picture? I do not. So don't get discouraged if you look at these blobs of soft, wet washes and you think, I don't know what to do with this. Just take one little step. Now, I had some ideas. That light section there I thought might make a nice backlit area for the trees. Wanted a grove of almost sort of fantasy-like trees. Storybook really is probably a better description of what I'm going for here. Something that looks very storybook. And the waterfall. I saw a waterfall. Now, I knew that blob of green was going to be a tree. So I started detailing some of the edges. And you just start taking little steps. Now, it helps a lot that I do plein air quite frequently with trees and bushes and grass and landscapes and stuff. So I have sort of a visual library in my head of some of this stuff that I've practiced from life over and over. That's helpful. If you haven't done that, you're not familiar with how to render a tree or a bush or a sky or rocks, then yeah, you're probably going to struggle a little bit. So it's helpful to go out and do some of this from life. I saw this distant area that I thought, well, I could make some trees, a distant tree line back there, give it some depth. The waterfall was really starting to take shape as a center of interest. And I like that. That sort of helps me focus on how I'm going to create everything around it. So I know on the right hand and the left hand side, I'm probably going to need rocks and cliffs and that sort of thing. So I started looking at it that way. And I knew I was going to need to frame that waterfall with some foliage of some sort in the foreground. So these things just start to take focus or come into focus, kind of like a print that you would develop in a bath of developer. If any of you are familiar with the old, darkroom techniques. I knew that was going to be a tree on the left, so I'm just going to, model some of that foliage. Get that working. I loved how that soft area below the waterfall looked like a pile of mist, the way that waterfalls can create sort of a little cloud of mist at the bottom. So little things, just start coming into view. And I just start coaxing them out. But by and large, I don't see the whole scene. Now, what was really fun here, and something I haven't really done, is, and I do really have a lot of my paintings come out sort of otherworldly or not quite realistic, but sort of stylized and almost fantasy-like. But I really wanted to push this into the storybook realm, so to speak. You can take the illustrator out of the illustration business, but you can't take the illustration out of the illustrator. um, I love illustration, especially things in the fantasy and storybook realm. Just always been something I love. Now here's where I'm using some gouache, and I wanted to strengthen the light behind those tree trunks in the silhouettes. This is one of the few places I used gouache. And it's sort of a warm, brownish, tannish wash, although it looks very light. I just wanted the light behind those trees to glow. And I was just very, very pleased with how well the waterfall came together with a minimum of strokes. I haven't shown a lot of painting the waterfall. That's because I didn't do much. I painted a few streaks. You have to leave most of that very light. The only thing I wanted to change after I thought I had finished this, you can see here the tape was completely taken off, was that whole foreground area needed to be dark to frame that waterfall and that waterfall basin. And that really helped. And even as I do this voiceover, looking at that, I've been looking at it for a couple days, I could darken that even more and may go back and do some more. But I'm really pleased with this. There looks like there should be a story behind this, you know? Hey, if you want to take a stab, a little story synopsis, a little description of what the story might be, do so down in the comments. That might be fun for us all to read. Take a stab at it. So, what do you think of my spontaneous storybook illustration? I had such fun. And I hope it's really evident what you can do, again, with just 3 colors. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support. It means the world, and I will see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.